In the world of luxury fashion, where innovation meets reinterpretation, Prada's Spring Summer Collection 2025 just stepped into a controversy that feels oddly familiar. At first glance, it was just another high fashion runway. But then the camera panned down and social media erupted. Why? Because Prada just debuted a pair of heritage inspired leather sandals that looked almost identical to Kolhapuri chappals, the same handcrafted, culturally rich footwear worn across rural and urban India for over 800 years. And they were selling them for nearly 90,000 rupees, or approximately $1,000. Is this appreciation, appropriation, or something more nuanced? Let's break it down. To understand the backlash, we need to understand Prada. This is a brand that doesn't chase trends, it sets them. Led by Miuccia Prada and Ref Simmons, the fashion house is known for taking utilitarian objects and reinterpreting them with high fashion precision. They've done it with uniform, workwear, and even sportswear. But this time they touched something sacred. Because Kolhapuri chappals aren't just functional footwear, they're cultural identity. They're worn by everyone from farmers in Maharashtra to fashionistas in Delhi. They're not rare, they're real. So when Prada showcases them with the premium label and no clear mention of the Indian roots, it raises a deeper question. Where do we draw the line between inspiration and erasure? Now let's talk about the product itself. Prada sandal features a T-strap leather design, flat sole, and hand-stitched detailing, all of which are signature elements of the Kolhapuri chappal originally crafted in Kolhapur region of India. In fact, the Kolhapuri design has a geographical indication protection in India since 2019. That's not a coincidence. That's craftsmanship protected by law. So when a luxury house repackages the silhouette without acknowledging its origin, it doesn't feel like a nod. It feels like theft, with better lighting. To be clear, fashion borrowing is not new. Designers routinely draw inspiration from around the world. But the outrage isn't about the design, it's about context, or in this case, the lack of it. So the recent controversy that we see related to Prada, it has two big problems that we need to address. One is the obvious one, which is Prada copying the Kolhapuri chappals and just, selling them as flat sole leather sandals, something like that at $1,000, 90,000 rupees. That's of course a problem. But I think the internet is also waking up to a much deeper and long lasting problem. That is why has the Indian audience or Indian entrepreneur ecosystem not been able to capitalize to make their own brand to sort of celebrate the Indianness. Like we do that a lot with Ayurveda and skincare, but for some reason we haven't done that with Indian fashion, or at least Indian footwear to that extent. So this is a two sort of layer problem. Of course, Prada can apologize, move on, and then what we'll see is like a couple years later, somebody else will do the same thing with maybe, I don't know, with the gamcha or the Indian juti, which we wear at weddings and all. So this thing might be a repetitive problem in the future as well. That's no doubt. I think it just opens up a room for Indian brands and Indian founders to realize that, okay, there is a room for a brand, a homegrown brand, which can just make this problem not because we don't respect our culture. So I think as Indians also, we need to make sure that we're doubling down on more Indian brands and celebrating that Indianness and not just waking up when some Western company tries to capitalize on that. So I think that's a big problem. The internet didn't hold back. Fashion critics called it a textbook case of cultural appropriation. Indian creators made side-by-side comparison videos mocking the price tag, and mainstream India, from Vogue to The Hindu, began publishing think pieces on luxury colonialism. Even everyday consumers weighed in, with outrage on social media platforms like Instagram, Reddit, and X. What we are seeing isn't just anger, it's the exhaustion of being copied without being credited, of seeing your culture become someone else's campaign. See, recently we've seen that people are waking up and are becoming more and more conscious in terms of which brands they associate themselves with. The challenge here is India is such a growing market for every brand. We have seen Apple doubling down on India because as our disposable income increases, we become a very big market. The same thing people have done for China as well. So brands, of course, they will have to be a lot more careful and tread this very carefully that they don't offend somebody in the Indian market. However, we've also seen that because these brands are luxury brands, this problem is something that people will just forget in a couple of months. We should not forget this in a couple of months but eventually people will, and people who eventually come to that level of income that they can afford Prada, I don't think they will be like, oh, Prada did that controversy, so we will not purchase them. So this has to have more long lasting impact than just the reputation. I think the reputation, people will forget about it. I think there has to be some sort of legal consequences of it, or something that, also pays respect to the Indian artisans who have been in this space, because people will eventually forget about it. That's the whole idea behind every publicity. Like, even bad publicity is like publicity at the end of the day. So this has to have some legal ramifications, some financial ramifications, or something like that, for it to have at least some positive impact net for the Indian artisans. For Prada, the short-term media buzz isn't necessarily bad. Luxury thrives on attention, even controversial ones. But the long-term risk? Losing cultural goodwill. Because Gen Z and millennial consumers are different. They don't just buy products, they buy values. They want brands that know the difference between celebrating and stealing. And this isn't Prada's first brush with backlash. They've faced criticism in the past, from radically insensitive imagery to lack of diversity in casting. But this time, the controversy feels deeper. It touches something emotional, and in luxury, perception is everything. We've seen reports coming out that Prada has released a couple of statements apologizing and trying to find a way to collaborate with Indian artisans. As the time of this conversation, I don't think this has led into something more concrete, that credits are given or something like that. We're yet to see that, but we've seen Prada to at least take that very first step towards solving this issue. So let's see what that leads to. This isn't just about a $1,000 sandal. It's about how fashion continues to borrow from Global South without acknowledgement, without credit, and without reciprocity. It's about whether tradition can survive being named as trend. And it's about whether brands, no matter how powerful, can evolve to do better. To Prada's credit, they haven't released a defensive statement yet. But maybe they shouldn't. Maybe it's time to listen, to collaborate, to tell the full story, and not just the aesthetic one. Because the fashion doesn't just inspire, it respects. And sometimes the most powerful thing a brand can do is walk a mile in someone's chappals.